And I'm going to share the screen. Okay, everybody can see this. All right, so last time we left off, we had this I don't know what the word method. It's not the right word I'm looking for, but of Tanavashir, that sometimes when you're looking for distinctions and or differences between issues or topics, and they say there's something missing here. There's an area between these two issues that are missing, but they were listed. There was a list of distinctions, and then and one thing wasn't on the list. So does that mean it's not? It doesn't. It's the same. It doesn't distinguish between these two, whatever the two issues you're talking about. In this case, it was when you the individual who adds the Anenu prayer into the Shomea Tfilah, incorporates it into that prayer, versus the community who adds an entire new blessing. And can the individual on his or her own add the individual blessing, make Anenu an individual blessing? And they compare, they say, right now we're talking about between the second set of fasts, the 3-day second set of 3 fasts during a drought, versus the last group of fasts, which is 7. And the Baraita told us that there's no difference between the second set of fasts and the last group of fasts, except for a couple of things. And it didn't mention this addition of the Anenu as an individual prayer. So the question is that, does that mean that there is no distinction? Those two, there's no distinction between the second set of fasts and the third set of fasts regarding the recitation of Anenu. And the answer was, or one answer was, Tana Vishir. Well, they taught this, but they didn't give the whole entire list. They just taught a few of the distinctions between the two, but you can't say that's exhaustive. So, and that's where we left off. And the last question was V'tisbara ein bein davka. So when it says ein bein, there's no difference between. Are we supposed to take that literally? There is no difference because, by the way, they did leave something out. V'hashi er teva. They left off the issue of teva. That is, in the last set of fasts, we mentioned we take the ark out into the street and we make this public display. And the answer is, well, no, that's imishum teva lav shi'urahu. That really wasn't one of the omissions, because we were talking about things that are done in private, meaning that in probably not private to the individual, but private in a private space. So in a synagogue, we were talking about differences between something you might do in the synagogue or in homes, not b'farhesia, in the public square. And so therefore, they weren't teaching about matters in the public square, and we were talking about prayer. And prayer was the issue, and that's something that they would define as bitsina, in private. And then I'm not really sure what the Gemara is doing here, because we kind of have the exact same argument all over again, but with a different answer. So Amar Rav Ashi matniti nami daika. Also, if you read the Mishnah carefully, it shows the katani ma elu yiterot al rishon note. Hi, Ezekiel.
Hello.
So we're at just at the beginning here of 14 and 14a. So that not only, if you read the Mishnah carefully, it says these are the additional severities. Elu yiterot al rishonot. The more additional the additional stringencies from the middle 3 fasts. So since it says these are, it sounds like they're making a definitive statement. These are the only ones. Ela shebe'elu matri'in v'noalin et hatchanuyot. So the differences were that on the last 7 days, the last 7 fasts that are declared when there's a drought, the difference is from the middle fasts is that they call the alarm and they shut down the store. The stores have to be closed. Everything else, it's the same. So So basically, if you said there was something omitted, what's omitted? Where's the omission here? Because it sounds like they're saying this is it. These are the only 2 differences. So again, they ask, well, I mean, are you assuming that just because it says these are the things that this is it? This is the entire thing. Once again, they say, wait, we got this issue of the teva. They didn't include that. That's a difference between the last set of fasts and the middle set of fasts. Imishum teva lav shiura hu. But if you want to use that as your example, it's not really an omission in the same way. Mishum dekahashiv la beidach pirka. Oh, because we're not done yet. We're going to talk about that in another chapter. So we'll get to that eventually. Hashta de'ate lahachi esrim va'arba. Oh, that's what it, right. And this whole issue of 24 blessings, that was the issue, not the 18 or 19. Although I think that's part of it too. But the 24 blessings, right? Because during the fasts, we make an addition of 6 blessings to the Amidah. So in these additional 6, that's a distinction between the 6 and between the second set of fasts and the third set of fasts, isn't it? Oh, well, you know what? That matter is not an omission either. They didn't omit that either because, in fact, they're going to talk about that in the next paragraph, which is next chapter, which is what we're going to do right away.
I sort of wondered, reading this, we're deferring that discussion to later.
Right, right.
I mean,
so
that indicates more organization to this than I'm perceiving.
Exactly, right, because they're aware that in the next chapter of the Mishnah, they do begin talking about when you say the 24 blessings.
Okay, so that organization is coming from the Mishnah.
Right. So in the end, I just was found that confusing because they seem to have they brought up the same issue of the Teva twice and they came up with different answers. So I guess that's a question for how the Mishnah, how the Talmud is edited. That would be a more advanced kind of critical analysis question of how this thing is put together. But I just thought that was kind of odd that you had the exact same question, different answer. All right, in the end, but then my have Allah, and as we see here in the notes, that comment, my have Allah, is usually asked at the end of a lengthy discussion in which different opinions have been expressed and that you don't have an answer one way or the other you can't really tell. So sometimes, not always, but sometimes the Gemara will say, okay, well, here's the resolution. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, and even here in the resolution, we show that they've got different opinions. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Sasratai, v'chein Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav. Bein goel lirofe. You add, no, see, we were talking about the 18 versus 19. You add this additional, you add the Anenu prayer in between these 2 blessings, the goel blessing and the rofe blessing. So it's a separate blessing unto itself, and that's where you add it. Rav Ashi Amar Mishmei de Rabbi Yanai Berei de Rabbi Yishmael. Bishomea tefillah. No. This opinion, going back to Rabbi Yishmael, is that you add it into the Shomea tefillah. It's part of that blessing, which is the last petition we make in the Amidah. And the conclusion is v'hilchata b'shomea tefillah. So the Rabbi Yishmael's view is the one that holds. And in fact, today what our practice is that on a fast day, in the afternoon, not in the morning, but in the afternoon mincha service, when the individual prays the Amidah, you add the Anenu passage into Shomei Tefillah. But when the Shaliach Tzibur repeats the Amidah, he or she adds the Anenu as a separate blessing. So in the end, we kind of do both, I guess. Although obviously the difference is which is where this whole discussion began. The individual adds it in Shomei Tefillah, but the prayer leader representing the community creates a separate blessing for it. Now we have a short piece about pregnant and nursing women with fast, because usually pregnant and nursing women are not required to fast because of the concern of what it might, any harm it might bring to the child or to the woman, actually weaken them. So, but they're not. It's not a total. You don't have to fast. It's just that they're more lenient in terms of fasting. But here, speaking of, we talked about logic last time. This is one of these logical puzzles. So we're going to have 3 different opinions, and in the end, they're all going to be the same. We're going to point out that they show that they're all the exact same. So what are the 3 different opinions? So one opinion is that pregnant and nursing women don't fast on the first fast. Remember, there's 3 groups of fast. There's 3-day fast. Then if the rain doesn't come, we do another 3-day fast. And if the rain still hasn't come, the rabbis can declare the last a group of 7-day fasts. And they're not 3 days in a row. They're right there, Monday, Thursday, Monday, and then followed by another Monday, Thursday, Monday, and then followed by 7 of them. So so the first group of fasts, they do fast, but they don't fast the last fasts. Another Braita said, no, the pregnant and nursing women fast on the last set of fasts, but they don't fast on the first set of fasts. And yet in another Braita said they fast neither on the first fast days nor the last fast days. And now Rav Ashi says, by the way, they're all giving the same answer. Aha, how is that possible? They seem to be telling exact opposites. No, because this is how, as Steinsaltz explains, it's an issue of semantics. So you've got 3 groups of fasts. So the first opinion was they fast on the first fast, but not the last fast. We're not talking about the first 3, but rather the middle 3, which are considered to be the last group of fasts, and they fast on the middle of the first of the. Wait a minute, am I getting this right? You're right. They fast on the first group of fasts of the latter fasts, but not the very last fast. The middle one, they fast on the last set of fasts, but they don't fast on the first set of fasts. In this case, this Baraita, who the opinion was, they're thinking in terms of the first group of fasts. So the women fast on the last set of initial fasts. And the third group, when they say they fast neither on the first or the last, that's because the first, they're thinking of all 3, and they don't fast on the first 3 fasts. They don't fast on the last 3 fasts. On the last 7 fasts, they fast on the middle ones. And so all 3, even though it sounds like they're all different, they're actually all speaking of the middle 3 fasts. And the reason that Steinsaltz tells us is the first 3 are not that serious. People are very lenient. Everybody's lenient about the first 3. The last 7 are very severe. That's when they're closing the stores down, and people are taking it very seriously out of concern. And so the middle 3 those are the only 3 that the women should fast on. It's a time of great concern, but not as severe. We don't want the women to fast at the most severe time. And I suppose 7 is obviously much longer than 3. Okay, so that's the next section. New section. Ma elu yiterot ala rishonot. What does it mean when it says they're more? What are the greater stringencies over the first or the earlier set of fasts? The difference is that on these they blow shofar, or they call the alarm, and they close down the stores. They lock up the stores. Okay, so what does it mean to sound the alarm? Matri'in, usually, as I mentioned, the verb there, tru'ah, or tav reish ayin, usually has to do with blowing a horn, shofar, those sounds. But we're going to see that there's two opinions. Rav Yehuda amar b'shofarot. That's the obvious one. That you, when it says they sound the alarm, they mean they blow shofar on these days. The Rav Yehuda b'rei de Rav Shmuel bar shelat mishmei de Rav amar ba'anenu. That it's the anenu. That's when we say we sound the alarm. It means we say the anenu prayer, which actually goes back to that discussion before we were having. When do you add the anenu prayer in? Is it in the 7 days, the middle fast, the first fast? So now the response is, so you've got two possibilities: shofar or the anenu prayer. Kasal kadatan man de amar ba'anenu lo amar b'shofarot. Uman de amar b'shofarot lo amar ba'anenu. So if you're thinking, if you're making the assumption that those two opinions are exclusive, either matri'in, sounding the alarm, means shofar, or it means anenu. The Hatanya, we have this baraita that says, is that correct? Because ein pochtin misheva taniot al tzibur. We don't, and this is I think supporting this notion. The Hatanya ein pochatin misheva ta'aniot al hatzibur. We don't lessen we don't, the court does not decree fewer than 7 fasts, which includes 18 acts of sounding the alarm. And a mnemonic for this is Yericho. Viricho shofarot hava. If what does it mean that the mnemonic for this was Jericho? Because Jericho, of course, was the story when Joshua attacked the city of Jericho and brought it down, brought the walls down by by this ritual, including blowing shofar. And so this is a conclusive refutation of the one who said that according to the opinion of Rav, they sound the alarm only by reciting anenu. So how could it be that one says shofar and one says anenu exclusively? It's either one or the other, when we have this other baraita, which seems to suggest that no, it's blowing shofar is what it means when you say sound the alarm. So in a sense, maybe I'm wrong. So maybe this is the proof. This Hatanya is, well, no, Tanya seems to be supporting. It's either shofarot or anenu. Oh, no, the Hatanya is suggesting, how could that be? Because you've got this teaching that says everybody agrees it's shofarot. It's because Yericho is this mnemonic. So it must be shofarot. So it's a tiyuvta. It's a refutation of anybody who suggests that sounding the alarm means anenu. All right, so then now the Gemara is going to backtrack. Ella b'shofarot dechule alma lo plige. Nobody disagrees about sounding the alarm means shofarot. The issue is the karela hatra, that shofarot is hatra'ah. When you see that verb, we're talking about blowing a shofar or some kind of a horn. But what they are arguing about, ki plige ba'anenu, they were arguing, do you also sound the alarm with the anenu prayer? Mar savar kare la hatra'ah, that one says reciting anenu is also considered to be hatra'ah, alarm, sounding alarm. And Mar savar lo kare la hatra'ah. And the other opinion was, no, it's not, we don't consider reciting anenu as sounding the alarm. Lamande amar ba'anenu kol shekem b'shofarot. The one who says sounding the alarm includes bi'anenu, of course they believe that shofarot is another way of sounding the alarm. Ulamanda Amar b'shofarot, but the one who says that shofarot is sounding the alarm of Alba Anenu La, but that doesn't mean you should Anenu. So everybody holds shofar. Now we have, anybody question? Okay. Now we have another Baraita, which is going to question this. Vatanya, Usha'ar kol minei puranuyot midragshot, and then we have a whole list with regard to other types of calamities that occur. And then we have a whole bunch of them. Got scabs, locusts, flies, hornets, mosquitoes, infestations of snakes or scorpions. So you can see these are all kind of natural, these are infestations by creatures. It says, when these things occur, lo hayu matri'in, they would not do matri'in, ella they would do tso'akin. So wait a minute. So akim is the term that we want to use when you cry out. Hatra'a is the term for shofarot. So they're suggesting there's a difference in language here. And the answer is Tana'ehi. This is a dispute that goes all the way back to the Tanaim, the much earlier generation, who, again, in this world, the older the opinion, the more weight it carries. They're more authority, I should say, the more authority it has. So we have these two views from the Mishnaic period, because Tana, again, is the Mishnah. Al elu matri'im b'Shabbat. These are the following calamities, they sound the alarm, even on Shabbat. Al ir shehikifu hagais o nahar ve'al sfina hamitorefet bayam. So you can see that there were a lot of types of calamities you have in a community. Before we were talking about bugs and dangerous creatures. Here, the calamity would be on Shabbat, and even then, if these things happened, you sound the alarm. A city is surrounded by an enemy army, or there's a possible flood, or a ship is being tossed about at sea. And Rabbi Yossi Amar le'ezra aval lo letza'aka. He says, alarm may be sounded on Shabbat to summon help, but it may not be sounded for crying out to God. Now, he has a note here on crying out to God. But before we get to the note, let's just look at that for a second. So on Shabbat, there's a danger, and they say you're permitted to, again, sound the alarm. Because this is pikuach nefesh, I would assume you're trying to save lives, so you're permitted to certain leniencies. And but Rabbi Yossi suggests that it's only for Ezra, but you don't do it for tze'aka. You don't do it for prayer, crying out. Now, Rashi says two possible explanations. The commentary in Steinsaltz follows Rashi's first explanation, according to which Rabbi Yossi permits the community to sound the alarm in times of danger to summon people for assistance, even on Shabbat. But he does not allow them to cry out to God in prayer on Shabbat, which is a little bit, what does it mean? I mean, we're always, you daven on Shabbat. But I guess, we don't add petitions in our Shabbat Amidah. We take out the petitions.
Right.
And we just have the statement of talking about Shabbat. So that seems to be what he's saying, is we don't call out to God, please God save these people. That's how my understanding of it here. Now he says, according to Rashi's second explanation, Rabbi Yossi maintains that on Shabbat, the people may pray for assistance as individuals, but not as a community. So, which also makes sense. I mean, that's just a natural human response. If you see somebody in trouble, it's hard to stop a person from saying, well, please don't pray on their behalf. That's kind of weird. But the community doesn't have this anenu, this kind of communal prayer for help added to their daily worship. to the day's worship. But in that case, but see, now we have this issue. But see, with what do they sound the alarm? Okay, because if you say shofarot, because we've all along we've said, oh, matri'in means shofarot. But wait a minute, if it's shofarot b'Shabbat, mi shari. Who permits you to blow shofar on Shabbat? Right? And we know on Rosh Hashanah, we don't blow if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat and Sunday. We don't blow shofar on Shabbat. So you don't. So it's kind of understood that you're not blowing shofar on Shabbat. But the term said that you matri'in. So ella lav ba'anenu v'karei la hatra'a shmamina. So the conclusion is, rather, it is not the case that this is referring to the recitation of the Anenu prayer, and yet the Mishnah calls this sounding the alarm. Conclude from this that there is a Tana who does maintain that sounding the alarm is in fact performed by prayer, as claimed by Rav Yehuda, which was up above here. So the fact that Rabbi Yossi says the alarm may be sounded for help, but we're not talking about prayer. And if it's not shofarot, so somebody must assume that sounding the alarm means prayer of some kind, because this is a dispute between these earlier sages. So one is saying you sound the alarm on Shabbat, it's permissible, but we don't. But it's not prayer. And the other one says that the other opinion must be that sounding the alarm includes prayer. And so therefore, going back to this, that's why it's, so there is a possibility that there were earlier sages, earlier authorities, who thought differently about the term matri'in, about what matri'in includes, and therefore to hold that opinion that it also includes praying, reciting Anenu, is in fact acceptable opinion. Okay, now we have a new section, case study. Bishnei de Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya Hava Tza'ara. There was a trouble in the community during the time of Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. That's not Rabbi. That's a different rabbi. This is a Mora. A rabbi from the Talmudic period, Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, and he Gezar Tlat Esrei Taniot. Okay, they had their 13. They did all three, the three sections of fasts, including the very last one, V'lo Iani, and they weren't answered. The drought didn't end. Savar lemigzar tvei, and he thought about adding additional fast days because, if it didn't work, maybe we need to do more. Amar le Rabbi Ami, Hare Amru ein machichin et hatzibur yoter midai. Rabbi Ami disagreed and said, you can't do that. It's too much on the community. It's too hard on them. Don't impose more than 13 fasts. Amar Rabbi Abba Barei de Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Ami da'avad legarmehu da'avad. This was Rabbi's, now this was kind of he did so on his own authority. Well, of course he did it on his own authority. But the note here explains that when it says his own authority, or at least Rashi's interpretation, is that he was speaking just on his own. He wasn't really making a communal, wasn't stating this as his opinion for the community. He was just stating it for himself. I totally sympathize with him. He didn't like the fast. It was really hard. So he's saying, don't do it. It's too much if you make any more fasts. And it wasn't part of it wasn't the majority opinion. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, Rabbi Yochanan said, they taught only that the community observes a maximum of 13 fasts when they are praying for rain. So this is in a case, we've seen a number of different types of calamities that you might pray for and have a communal fast. But in the case of rain, which is mainly what we've been talking about, there's a drought. In that case, you observe a maximum of 13. However, with regard to other types of calamities, holchin ad sheyeh anu min hashamayim, you keep on fasting until God answers you. And then this is the halacha, Tanya nami hachi, kishe amru shalosh, uche amru sheva, lo amru ela legeshamim. So it was also taught in the Baraita, this very same ruling. This whole notion of 3 fasts, 7 fasts, this is referring to Geshamim, aval l'sha'ar minei puranuyot, mitanin v'holchin ad she'anu. You just keep on fasting, you keep on declaring fasts until the calamity ends, or you're answered. There's a response to your prayers. So if that's so, lema tehave tiyuvte de Rabbi Ami, is that then tiyuvta is a refutation? So is that a refutation to Rabbi Ami's opinion? Well, Rabbi Ami would say to you, Tana'ehi. Again, we go back to this concept of, no, this was an earlier opinion that Tanaim disagreed about, and I happen to be siding with one of the Tanaim. Did Tanya ein gozrin yoter mishalosh esrei taniyot al tzibur lefi she'ein matrichin et tzibur yoter midai. Divrei Rabbi. This is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. This is the compiler of the Mishnah. So according to Rabbi, you can't declare, you can't decree more than 13 fasts for the community because it's just too much. You can't. There's only so much the community can handle with that. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer lo mina shem huzeh. That's not the reason. Here Hashem means the reason, the point, the source of this ruling. Rather, it's practical because we talked about this earlier. The rainy season goes until it goes until the beginning of spring, and that if it starts raining then in Nisan, that's actually a bad sign. So he's saying that by the time you get through these 13 fasts, and again, remember, it's not 13 days in a row, it's spread over a period, it's the rainy season is done. There's no point in fasting for rain anymore. So it's a more practical explanation. I think that Rabbi's decision is something that we can understand because we're going through it right now. This whole lockdown thing, there's only so much people can handle, and that's what the public health officials are finding. You keep telling people to lock down, they're just going to say that, forget the whole thing. That they can't, there's only so much people can handle, and then it causes other problems, as we know, at least in our society, the whole mental health issue. So you fast until you go through these fasts for a certain period, and that's it. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel had a more practical reason. It's just because the rainy season has ended. In any case, Rabbi Ami was saying that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, that it's you can't trouble the community excessively. Well, we have another case with Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Shalchule b'nei Nineveh l'Rabbi. So here the people of Nineveh, and you can see the picture there. I think Nineveh is what, Mosul? Yeah. So it's up here in what's modern day Iraq. They said, and we also learned this, that in Babylonia, it's much longer rainy seasons. They don't even need the rainy season so much because there's so much fertility there. But in any case,
it is the same city of in the time of Yonah, the prophet.
So that's a good question. I think it might be. I'm trying to remember the Nineveh at the time of the prophet. I thought it was farther west. and a little bit farther north. I thought it was up near where modern Syria is.
Mhm.
He's telling us that the ancient city of Nineveh was located near modern day Mosul. So I'm not sure if it's the same city or a different city of Nineveh.
Alright.
I'm the only reason why I would guess that it's a different Nineveh is because, but of course things change over hundreds of years, is that the Nineveh in the time of Jonah is definitely not a Jewish city.
Oh,
And this city seems to be a Jewish city. But it could be that, in the time of Jonah, it wasn't Jewish, but by the time, hundreds of years later, the Jewish diaspora had moved there. So I'm not really sure if there are, different locations of Nineveh.
okay.
But in any case, Steinsaltz says that the ancient city of Nineveh is near modern day Mosul.
Wikipedia seems to treat it as the same city.
Same city? Okay.
Well, it tells of mound ruins, including a site of a shrine to Jonah.
Oh,
I don't know. It's just a quick look.
I think it's always hard to know, so to establish some of these ancient cities. Obviously, if there's a tell, and you can determine if there's something in some kind of epigraphic evidence that says this is Nineveh, but otherwise you kind of have to guess whether it's
Around 5,000 years ago, it was an important religious center to the goddess Ishtar. So,
okay.
and that's the one that's near Mosul. So
Okay. So so it could be. It could very well be. I think it's interesting. Let's see. No, he doesn't say anything here either. The fact that he doesn't that's another reason I'm just wondering if it's the same, only because why doesn't he say this is the, where Jonah was? But maybe it is. I don't know.
You might think that's obvious.
Yeah. Okay, so in any case, these people who are living in Nineveh, clearly Jewish people at this point, sent a question to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So this is like in the beginning of the 3rd century, end of the 2nd century of the Common Era. That people such as us who require rain even during the season of Tammuz, so they have their rain falls in different times of year than it does in the land of Israel, and who live in areas where rain falls all year round. What should we do if there's a drought during the summer? Are we likened to individuals, or are we likened to a community? Meaning, do we add, here's the Gemara explains the practical difference between these two options. Are we likened to individuals and therefore add the anenu in the Shomei Tfilah, or are we like the community and we add Uvivirkat Hashanim? Okay, so this is a new. Oh, no. I see. Right. We're talking now about. That's so interesting. Talking about the rain. Now, in Birkat Hashanim, which is the blessing, it's right at the very beginning of the request, right in the middle of the request in the Amidah. It's the one that we change, right, during our current practice. Well, in the land of Israel, they change it right after they ask for rain in that blessing, right after Sukkot, right? We talk about it on the 7th of Cheshvan. But in the diaspora, our current practice is, even though it has nothing to do with our climate change, our climate issues in America, everybody in the diaspora adds the request for rain 60 days after the autumnal equinox, plus 11 days because of the change in calendar. So it's the fourth or 5th day of December.
the Reformed prayer book sticks with, I guess, the Israeli practice.
There's only one day that it only adds one. I mean, there's only one time to add that.
It adds it, on Simchat Torah or right after it or something.
Interesting. Okay.
I think. I
So
believe I can fish out a prayer book and check that. Chuck's getting it to check the
Okay.
footnote, but
That's an interesting decision. So in that sense, they're really saying,
It adds something to the Gevurot at that time.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's two additions, right? We began this the Talmud discussion.
So this
with-
is a separate edition you're talking about now.
Right. So there's the acknowledging that God's power is to bring rain. That's in the Gevurot. That's the second blessing of the Amidah. And that's when we add, we go from either,
Yeah.
we add, not Tein Talmud Torah, that's when we add Mashiach Ruach Amri Dagasha. Then in the Birkat HaShanim, which is, I think it's is it the 8th or 9th blessing of the Amidah? It's right after right after the blessing for healing. We ask for blessing for prosperity. And in that one, in the land of Israel, they add this, and there it's a prayer asking God for rain. Tein Tal Umatar Livracha. Bring us a blessing for rain. So that we add in the land of Israel, they added right after Sukkot, because that's when they need rain. That's the rainy season in Israel. But in the diaspora, at least in Babylonia, we saw this in the Gemara, that it's that 60 days after the autumnal equinox, which in our calendar today is 60 plus 11.
So that's part of the weekday, not
right.
Shabbat.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we don't tend to be as familiar with that.
Okay. Yeah. So that one we start adding on the 4th of December. But here these guys are saying, wait a minute, we have the rainy season all year long. So when should we add this request? Now, see, it's a little confusing because we've been talking about Anenu, and here they're talking, and his explanation, see, he's editing in here when there is a drought during the summer. So this is a little bit confusing because if this is about a drought, are we likened to individuals or likened to a community? Well, our discussion about that was all about drought periods. But the answer that's given is, are we likened to the community, and do we add do we pray for rain in the ninth? Oh, here it tells us the 9th blessing, the blessing of years, Birkat HaShanim. But there was kind of a bait and switch here because we expected them to say, are we like the community, and add Anenu in between the 4th and the it would be the 7th and the 8th blessing. But they bring in Birkat HaShanim, which is something that we haven't seen at all. So this is again the assumption here that he's making because of the context that we're talking about drought. But it is odd that if we're talking about drought, it doesn't seem like we're talking about the Anenu prayer, because you don't add the Anenu prayer anywhere. We've seen a discussion of adding the Anenu prayer in Birkat HaShanim. You add the request for rain in Birkat HaShanim. So this is a little bit confusing, but in any case, the answer does make sense. He says if you have a drought, Yechidim, you are comparable to being Yechidim, and it's the summer. Then you add the prayer asking for additional rain, which we can make the assumption maybe he's talking about Anenu here, in the Shomei Tefillah, which lines up with everything we've seen so far. The weird part was just, why would you think it would be in Birkat HaShanim? And he didn't have any explanation for that. And now that I'm mentioning this, I've got to go look into that, because that's weird. That's just out of the blue. That isn't what we expected. So I don't know why either they threw this discussion in because of the context of fasts, and the answer is you put it in Shomei Tefillah, which is not the answer for requesting rain. It's for when there's a drought and you say the Anenu prayer. And this was maybe just another opinion that we haven't discussed, or so it's possible that this, or it may be that this whole discussion belongs somewhere else, and they just stuck it in here because of it seemed like it belongs in this longer discussion of Anenu. It's kind of
This seems,
interesting.
this seems to turn to some degree on the issue of individuals versus community.
Right, right. So that's
And these are people in the diaspora.
right, exactly. Yeah.
And
So
so they're treated as individuals and not as a community.
yeah, so that right. So either so the confusing thing is because the issue is community versus individual, it seems to fit in the greater context of our discussion. But because they threw in this Birkat HaShanim deal,
Yeah.
it just throws the whole thing off. So it's not. But again, because the Talmud is put together as an editorial composition, and they have pieces from all over, it's possible that this was deemed appropriate here, even though the original discussion may have been about something, it may not have been about drought. It may have been about just when do we ask for rain? So I don't know. My critical Talmudic skills are not good enough, even though that was definitely a year of Talmud study we had, where we had to study the critical study of an analysis of Talmud and its editing. I never really, it was hard enough for me just to learn Talmud straight, let alone try to start figuring out the layers of it. But
I can sympathize with that.
those guys who do it, man, they are really good. I mean, because they see these seams in the text, which is very subtle, but those who are good at it can see that. Anyway,
this comes as a question though about rain.
yes, yeah, right.
It is about rain and drought.
Well, it is about rain and drought, but in Birkat HaShanim, we ask God for rain. That's the time that we ask for. So it makes sense that if the question in the Hebrew, it's in the Aramaic, is anan afilu b'tkvat tamuz ba'enan mitra. We even need rain in the summer. What should we do? Well, does that mean there's a drought in the summer? What should we do? Or does that mean, do we keep asking for rain even in the summer when in the land of Israel, you're no longer asking for rain?
Well, it says here, now this is partly Steinsaltz interpolation. Are we, what should we do when there is a drought?
Exactly, right. That's my point, is that Steinsaltz is telling us that it's about a drought.
Yeah.
But if you didn't have Steinsaltz, could you have taken this whole paragraph, cut it out, and then pasted it somewhere in some other discussion? I don't know.
Or cut it out from some other discussion and pasted it here.
Exactly. And Steinsaltz clearly is reading it as a seamless piece because, of course, it's got to be talking about drought. That's what our conversation is. But but when they throw in the Birkat HaShanim here, it's like, wait a minute, who said anything about adding Birkat prayers for drought in Birkat HaShanim? So that's just, I'm just a couple of weeks away from this class on literary theory in the Hebrew Bible. So the whole point is discontinuity, and there's clearly a discontinuity, right? And that when you see discontinuous pieces, that's when you start to question, wait a minute, what's this doing here? Even though usually we don't, but if the editor is good, you don't notice it. You kind of just skim over it because, of course, the conversation has been about drought. So
you're probably not surprised to learn that many people express amazement when they're told there are two stories of creation.
Exactly. All right, so let's go on here. So Meitve, so here's a objection. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Eimatai. When do the halachot concerning the times during which the prayer for rain is recited apply? So here's part of this discussion. When do we add these prayers for rain? Now we're talking about prayers for rain again. Ketiknan shehashanim ketiknan v'Yisrael shruyin al admatan. During the time when the climate, when the years are as they should be, which is, you know, an issue for us in our world. And Yisrael is on its own land. Aval b'zman hazeh hakol lefi hashanim, hakol lefi hamikomot, hakol lefi hazman. But now, see, this is very interesting because we talked about this before. Nowadays, when the Jewish people are dispersed around the world and climate is not always as it ought to be, all is in accordance with the year, the local climate. All is in accordance with the place in question, and all is in accordance with a particular time. And therefore, one prays for rain in the blessing of years as necessary for the local climate. Now, we've talked about this, where in our diaspora prayer book, our diasporan prayers, we throw in that on the December 4th, but that's not our local time when we would ask for rain. That's based on Babylonia time, but we do it because, well, Babylonia was the main diaspora, and we all want this kind of unity among the Jewish people. But there are people all the time who ask, well, why don't we just say it when it's appropriate time for us? But this seems to be an opinion. Rabbi Yehuda seems to hold that view. And Amarle matnita ramet ale de Rabbi Tanahu ufalig. So the answer is, wait a minute, you're going to say you should just pray for rain whenever it fits in your local climate? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is a Tana, and he said, he's a major authority, and he has the authority to dispute Rabbi Yehuda. And that's why we go back to this up here, where you ask for rain in the prayer for rain at a particular time, not whenever your community needs rain. My hava alei. So what's the conclusion here? Rav Nachman Amar beVirkat Hashanim. The prayer for rain is in Birkat Hashanim. Rav Sheshet Amar b'Shomei Tfilah. He says, no, you should ask it for the prayer for the who hears prayer. And the halacha is b'Shomei Tfilah. Well, now we're going back. Now it must be the Anenu prayer we're talking about. So it really is very confusing as to what they're talking about. But our assumption, now let's see, he's got a note here. The Gemara elsewhere states that if an individual wishes to offer a private prayer for financial assistance, he should insert it in the petition in the blessing of years. Why then should those who are in need of rain during the summer months insert the prayer for rain in the blessing who listens to prayer? One answer is that an individual may insert his prayer for financial well-being in the blessing of years, as his success will not necessarily cause others to suffer, whereas rain will certainly affect everybody. Another explanation is that the insertion of a private prayer for financial well-being is not considered a fundamental change in the blessing of the years, whereas the addition of a private prayer for rain when it is not needed by the entire Jewish people is indeed a deviation from the text of the blessing. Alternately, rain during the summer months, while necessary for certain peoples, occurs for others. So again, you have this kind of notion that when we're talking about praying for rain for personal needs, your own individual needs, or your personal, your singular community's needs, it kind of takes away from the whole communal, all the Jewish people are praying for rain at the same time. So by stating, well, there's 2 times of the year that we pray for rain. There's the start time for the land of Israel, that's the Jews in Israel, and there's the diaspora where we follow this Babylonian custom, and that keeps the people unified. So there's something to be said for unity. All right, now we get to this next piece. The Mishnah taught, on Monday they open the stores a little at nightfall, and on Thursday they're permitted to open the stores all day in deference to Shabbat. A dilemma was raised before this is remember, this is this is during the serious day, the 7 fast days. A dilemma was raised before the sages. How is this taught? What's the meaning of this ruling? Does it mean that on Monday the store owners open their doors a little, and on Thursday they open their doors They likewise open their doors just a little, but do so all day. This is this is also very weird. Like, what does it mean just open it a little? I don't understand here. Or perhaps the Mishnah means that on Monday they open their doors a little, but all day, and on Thursday they open their doors wide the entire day. I don't know what they mean. Let's see if he had a note here. He didn't really explain what it means a little. Like,
I had visions of it being open a crack.
yeah. So what, like, you whisper the guy, hey, I could use some potatoes today? I don't understand what they mean, but they're certainly taking it literally, the wording. Literally. So Tashma, okay, so here we have a lesson we have from a Baraita de Tanya. B'sheni matin ad ha'erev u'b'chamishi pochin kol hayom kulo mipnei kavod Shabbat. On Monday, they open the doors a little until the evening, and on Thursday, they open them the entire day in deference for Shabbat. One shop had two entrances, he opens one and locks one, thereby demonstrating that his store is not open in the normal manner. If he had a platform opposite his entrance, which conceals the door to his store, he may open in his usual manner without concern, as it is prohibited to open one's store not due to work, but only so that it not appear as though people are eating and drinking on this day. So maybe what it's just saying is just talking about doing some type of practice that shows we're really not open for business, but if you need food, you can come get it. But I want to show that it's not a normal day. I think that's how you have to read it. So opening the door a little bit means, yeah, they're open for business, but you know what? We don't want people to think that we're eating all day long. Okay, is this? Oh, we got a little ways to go here. Okay, all right. Let's see if we can speed this up. The Mishnah, Avru elu velona nu mamitim b'masau matan b'vinyan v'nitiyah. If these fasts have passed and they have not been answered, they decrease their engagement in business and negotiations and in building and planting. It was taught in the Tosefta. Building means joyful building, not building in general. Likewise, planting means joyful planting, not all planting. And then the Tosefta, which is another text comparable to the Mishnah. It's unlike the Baraitas, which are just kind of out there that are known. The Tosefta is a fixed text put together with material that didn't make it into the Mishnah. What is joyful building? This is referring to one who builds a wedding chamber for his son. It was customary upon the marriage of a son to build him a small house where the marriage feast was held and where the newlywed couple would live for a certain period of time. What is joyful planting? This refers to one who plants a splendid royal garden that does not serve practical purposes, but is only for ornamentation. So it's this kind of building and planting that we're limiting on during these very difficult days, which is something that they taught. I mean, maybe there's a more practical reason, but, you know, like in California, when they were having those terrible droughts, right, you couldn't water your lawn. Obviously, they watered, if you had, a farm, you needed the water for that because that was going to benefit the community. But if it's for your lawn, you know what, get a rock lawn or something. And uvesheilatu shalom, and we don't greet one another. The sages taught chaverim, members of a group dedicated to the precise observance of mitzvot. I pointed this out. The chaverim, a chaver is a friend, but chaverim in this case means people of a group which may have been the origin of the rabbinic class in any case, that they were referred to each other as chaverim. They do not extend greetings between each other at all, but the Amei Haaretz, the common, I don't know if I'd say uneducated, but the less educated, they're certainly not the people who are part of this elite group who extend greetings to chaverim, do so while unaware that this is inappropriate. The chaverim answer them in an undertone and in a solemn manner. And chaverim wrap themselves and sit as mourners and as ostracized ones, like people who have been rebuked by God, until they are shown mercy from heaven. Let's see, how much let's, because I know that next week we are basically, it's just the Mishnah that we're going to run through. Let's pause here since it's 12, and we'll finish up the chapter next week, and then we'll start the new chapter. Since the material is really very, it's pretty straightforward, no argumentation. Okay. Well, there was one thing I wanted to correct. I don't know why I was so confused last week when I was trying to explain the difference between 18 and 19. Well, why is we have 19 blessings, 19 prayers in the Amidah today, but we refer to it as the Shmona Esrei, because originally the Shmona Esrei meant, because Shmona Esrei is 18, and originally there were 18, and then a 19th one was added. And the Talmud states that the 19th was added because of this additional need to add a malediction. It's not a bracha, it's a curse against informers. And it explains that, to do this, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi asked, or was it Shimon ben Gamliel, asked the most modest, loving of the rabbis to write this malediction against Jews who inform on one another during the Roman period. And I said that that's not really, that's the Talmud's explanation, but it's not so clear that that's a historical explanation. And the reason why is because we now, when the Geniza was found, and the Geniza had material from the Middle Ages, all these texts. In fact, there are so many texts in the Geniza in Egypt, 100 years later, they still haven't read through all the texts that they have. But some of the texts they found were passages from Sidurim, the Amidah, that have 18 benedictions, including the malediction. So that's the question is, wait a minute, if you have 18 with this malediction, how did you get to 19? And the theory is that the last, it's the one about rebuilding Jerusalem and the coming of the Messiah, which is right before Shomei Tefillah. So what is it? It's the 11th and the 12th prayer, that at some point in these Sidurim with 18, including the malediction, those two separate blessings in our Amidah today were one blessing. They were written as one. So so it's not so clear as how we got to 19. It could be that a 19th prayer was added. It's possible that two blessings were split. And the theory that it wasn't that the 19th benediction was added is that if you look at the organization of the Amidah, I'll stop this. If you look at the organization of the Amidah, there are three blessings in a row. There's a blessing for justice, followed by a blessing for praising the righteous, followed by this malediction cursing the wicked. And that seems to work as a group. So the theory is that those three were always there, because true justice is not just rewarding the righteous, but it's punishing the wicked. And so therefore, those three must have been a unit within the Amidah, and then to get to 19, they must have split a longer prayer and put it into two. So that's one theory, and that's why I said it wasn't historic. It may not be historical, the story of adding the malediction to the Shmona Esrei. So a lot of different theories. We're not really sure, but I was a little I don't know why I was so confused trying to explain that last week, but I got lost. Okay. In any case, we'll meet next week. And again, Purim this year, we're not going to be doing on Thursday night at the synagogue. We'll do it. We're going to benefit from other people. There's a puppet show version of the Megillah from a congregation in Maryland that we're going to encourage people to stream if you got kids. And then and then for adults and anybody who wants, the JTS is doing a Megillah reading on Thursday night with parodies of Broadway songs interspersed in the reading. So that should be fun. And then on Friday morning, I'll read the Megillah out of the Megillah, the entire Megillah, but we won't try to do our multimedia presentation this year. We'll do that. We'll save that for next year. Okay. Very good.
you.
Everyone have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
take care.
Good week.
You too.